Hello, and welcome to Things We Said Today, our bi-weekly podcast about anything and everything to do with the Beatles, collectively and individually, past, present, sometimes even things to come. I'm Allan Kozinn, the author of The Beatles from the Cavern to the Rooftop and Got That Something, How the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything, and co-author with Adrian Sinclair of the McCartney Legacy series, Volume 1 and Volume 2 out now, Volume 3 starting slowly to be in the works. I'm joined by my two regular co-hosts, Ken Michaels, who you know is the host of the syndicated Beatles radio show Every Little Thing and a host of the solo Beatles podcast Talk More Talk. He also has his own YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, which is packed with Beatles-related interviews that you want to check out. Hello, Ken.
Hey, Alan. Hi, Darren. This is going to be a great show.
Hmm.
And also Darren Devivo, who's been a DJ at WFUV 90.7 in the New York area since February 1984. Long ago now. If you're not in the vicinity of New York, you can hear him and everything else at WFUV at WFUV.org. And Darren will tell you other information later.
Yes.
Hello, Darren.
Hello, Alan, and hi, Ken. Hi, everyone.
So today we're going to be talking about Ringo's new album, Look Up. Also, we're going to get a report from Ken, who went to the Nashville shows. And but first, Ken will tell us the news.
Okay, and one more thing, we're going to be announcing the winners of our
Oh yeah,
contest
yeah,
for the McCartney Legacy Volume 2. We have three winners. We'll tell you who the names are very soon.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
First
let's
of
have some
all,
news, Ken.
um, like you just said, Ringo Starr gave two concerts at the Ryman Theater in Nashville, January 14th and 15th. I was there for both of them, and right after the news, we're going to be talking all about that. Ringo's performances at the Ryman will, in fact, result in a television special, which is now set to air in March. And that will be on CBS and Paramount Plus. And part of the proceeds from the concert will benefit the wildfires in California. And Ringo was asked at the end of one of his shows by Emmylou Harris if he would like to perform with the Grand Ole Opry, to which he said yes. And he will be performing there on February the 21st, but it will not be a full Ringo concert. From what I've heard, it should be a set from Ringo. This is as a way of honoring him there. Don't know who will be backing up Ringo, but it will be happening at the new Grand Ole Opry. The Ryman was the original Grand Ole Opry. And again, that's on February the 21st. And Ringo will be appearing on Jimmy Kimmel's show, actually tonight. So by the time you guys see this, it may be too late, but hopefully they'll have it online. Um, Scheduled to be there on January 28th, which is tonight. Ringo is interviewed with T-Bone Burnett in the newest issue of Nashville Scene magazine, and he's also on the front cover of Mojo magazine. You might be asking, how has Ringo's new album Look Up performed on the charts? Well, on the Billboard album charts, the full album charts, the top 200, it debuted at 147. However, on Billboard's top country album charts, it debuts at a respectful 27. And on the top Americana and folk album charts, it debuts at number 12. In top album sales overall, it debuts at number 7. In top indie store album sales, it's at number 2. And top current album sales, it's number 5. It's kind of confusing, all these different charts that they have these days. But what it basically is saying is when it comes to physical sales, he's doing well. Once you add in the streaming, that usually appeals to young fans who buy things digitally and who listen to Spotify or listen on YouTube. Okay.
Can
Speaking
I
of Ringo,
can I jump in 1 second?
sure.
I was actually disappointed when I saw it debut at 147.
Hmm.
I don't know what I was expecting. but seeing the fact that on Amazon it was selling well, granted, like you pointed out, CDs, LPs, I thought that perhaps um, that might possibly allow it to crack the top 100. So when I saw 147, I was kind of disappointed because if you look at, now I'm assuming that, and maybe it won't do this, but usually what happens, it'll make an album like this will debut and then disappear.
Hmm.
It doesn't appear and then have some legs and move up. And so I'm thinking it starts at 147 and is going to go backwards and off the chart pretty quickly. If it does that, it's going to be the one of the lowest charting albums in Ringo's history as a solo artist.
Hmm.
He has some that didn't chart, and for some reason, I was very surprised to see that Choose Love didn't chart, at least from my research. Um, but you got to go back to Ringo the Fourth, topping out at 162.
Well, many
Um,
of his albums didn't chart at all, and even the EPs charted very low, and we're only on the charts for 1, maybe 2 weeks. So maybe with the fact that it also has some appeal on the country charts and Americana, maybe it'll have more legs. Maybe when this TV special airs in March, it'll give it a boost. And I certainly hope that they air the entire concert with the three new songs from Ringo that he did. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised. It's certainly gotten a lot of media attention, and
yeah.
Ringo's done a ton of interviews for this album. So you would have thought it would have debuted higher. But overall, once you combine physical and digital sales and streaming, you know, the newer artists do much better
Hmm.
because a lot of that is basically non-physical sales.
Hmm.
So let's hope that it continues to stay on the charts and that the TV special helps it a lot. I don't even know because I don't necessarily listen to country radio once in a while if his songs are getting any airplay there. Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
know.
it would really help with the new singles that came out, the emphasis songs that they released if any of them got airplay, they
Right.
certainly deserve to. But speaking of Ringo, a new solo documentary on Ringo Starr will be released by Netflix this year.
Hmm.
Recent successes of Get Back and McCartney 321 have demonstrated the continued appetite for content on the Beatles and other iconic artists. Titled Ringo, The Beat Goes On, the film will delve into Starr's personal and professional life. It will feature never-before-seen footage, personal interviews, and behind-the-scenes stories. The documentary aims to highlight Starr's influence not only as a musician, but also as a cultural icon who has shaped modern music for over 6 decades. This also features exclusive interviews with Ringo himself, along with Paul McCartney, Olivia Harrison, and other close friends and collaborators. There will be rare insights into Ringo's songwriting process. I'm most interested in that. Also, recording sessions and collaborations with some of the biggest names in the business. This certainly sounds promising,
Hmm.
and we'll have more on this as we hear about it. Now, thanks to Beatle fan, we have finally more definite word on the documentary One to One, John and Yoko. Magnolia Pictures has landed the North American rights, and it's currently screening at the Sundance Film Festival until February the 2nd. Magnolia plans to release One to One John and Yoko exclusively in IMAX theaters on April the 11th, then expanding to additional theaters. It will after that land on HBO and Max at a later date in 2025, but as of yet, no information about a physical release. But at least we have that. So we should be seeing this in April. on IMAX first, then just to the general public in mainstream regular movie theaters. And don't forget, we also have the other Lennon documentary, Borrowed Time, coming to theaters in May and June this year. And there'll be a DVD and Blu-ray to follow that. So a lot of Lennon material, and that's not even counting whether or not we're going to get Walls and Bridges as a CD box set or vinyl box set. A very special exhibit starting in February will be honoring George Harrison's passion for gardening. It's called George Harrison, A Gardener's Life, and it happens at the Marie Selby Botanical Gardens in Sarasota, Florida. The 2025 Gene and Alfred Goldstein exhibition will reimagine Friar Park, the estate that Harrison bought in 1970, which includes a Victorian mansion, lodges, and 32 acres of land. George bought this property with the hopes of revitalizing the land, and he used it as the backdrop for his All Things Must Pass album. Selby Gardens is reimagining some of the Friar Park gardens through botanical displays across its outdoor campus. In the Museum of Botany and the Arts, photos and art pieces will help tell the story of Friar Park and the growth it had because of Harrison. On February 11th, Selby Gardens will host an open conversation between Olivia Harrison and Robin Lane Fox, renowned author, gardener, and historian. And on February the 12th, Selby Gardens will host artist in residence and rock legend Patti Smith, who will perform a tribute concert for Harrison. Now, tickets for those two shows already went on sale on January the 24th, but you will have plenty of time to see this exhibit because it will run from February the 9th to June 29th. And Danny Harrison is in the news. In a new interview he did in Japan, he said he hopes the Beatles recordings of Free as a Bird and Real Love will be remixed to improve John's vocals, the same way it was for the group's recording of Now and Then, using Peter Jackson's demixing technology with his MAL program. And Danny wants this because the Beatles didn't have that opportunity in the 90s. A lot of people jumped on this and said, oh, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. But all Danny said was he hopes it's going to happen. And a reminder that the new documentary on the life of Brian Epstein, Midas Man, was due to be released on DVD Blu-ray on January the 24th and should be streaming on the channel Olyn, Olyn. We just heard today that Paul McCartney and Wings, their album Venus and Mars, will be celebrating its 50th anniversary with a half-speed master, which is coming out March the 21st. It's supposed to have all the bells and whistles that the album had in the packaging when it first came out, including, I think it was 2 posters, as I remember. I think you had something that you actually posted on your Facebook page about this, Darren.
Mm-hmm.
And it also had more information on there about more Wings releases.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the press release here. Yeah, I put it on my Facebook pages, and also I put it on ours, Things We Said Today's Facebook page as well. Yeah, it came with 2 posters and 2 stickers. And I remember not getting both posters when I got my copy of the album. Years later, I was like, what? But anyway, I said more than that. But anyway, what's interesting here in this press release, it goes on a very detailed explanation of Venus and Mars, March 21st release date. It's the, half-speed master, just like, the albums that have come before have been reissued as half-speed masters. And, the whole packaging replicating all blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the end of the press release, very interesting. It closes out here, and I quote, the first, you hear me? The first Wings release for 2025. Venus and Mars follows 2024's theatrical release of the rare Wings live and studio performance film, One Hand Clapping, and its accompanying album landing in the best of 2024 lists of Billboard, UPROXX, and the Los Angeles Times, as well as last year's 50th anniversary edition of Band on the Run. Last sentence, more exciting celebratory Wings activities and announcements are soon set to follow. So, of course, you immediately think, come on, this has got to be London Town and Back to the Egg. But who knows? Isn't there a McCartney documentary?
Man on the Run.
There is, yeah.
Okay. Could be that, could be everything.
They could also do the Wings Over the World documentary, the Wings Over Australia documentary. But other than that, I can't think of too many things in that category, sort of like one hand clapping, that haven't been released that we need to see. And I think like most people, to me, the logical things are the London Town and Back to the Egg archival
Yeah.
boxes. That would
Mm.
complete the Wings section of his discography for archival boxes, and then he should get back to work on the others.
Right.
I think he
And I
should.
don't know how far he was going. That if those two Wings ones comes out, that would make what Flaming Pie is the latest,
Yeah.
right? And everything before Flaming Pie was done.
No, it wasn't.
No.
No,
Uh,
Broad Street wasn't.
Rush
Broad
Street
Street,
wasn't.
Press to Play,
Press to Play wasn't.
Right, right.
Off the
Okay,
Ground.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, if you want to count Unplugged, and I don't
Yeah,
know how important Tripping the Live Fantastic is and Paul's Live is. So
yeah.
it just
Yeah, they're
seems
doing like a big anniversary edition of Clapton's Unplugged appearance. So not that that affects, if anything, what McCartney ever comes out.
just seems to me if Man on the Run is coming out this year, and the director even said it's coming out, although not saying exactly when. London Town and Back to the Egg would be a great companion piece to go with that.
Yeah.
So let's hope. Nice little teaser in there in the press release. Some upsetting news regarding the health of Joey Malin, who, as you know, has been hospitalized for nearly 50 days, starting with a very bad infection he had due to his diabetes, which caused septicemia and traveled through his body, causing him harm in multiple critical organs and bones. Joey was in a coma, and after a while, he came out of it and improved and showed a healthy appetite. But since then, he came down with pneumonia. His girlfriend, Mary Joy, says his health insurance only covers 2 weekly visits from physical and occupational therapists to help rehabilitate him for an hour each. And she has started a GoFundMe page. And if you'd like to donate to help Joey out with his health costs, we're giving you the link to that in our description box. Okay? Let's hope Joey recovers. He's a fighter, and we know how much he loves to get out there and perform for us, and we're all praying for him. In other news, there's actually quite a lot because we haven't done a show for, I think, 3 weeks now. A new box set is coming out on April 25th featuring the work of The Scaffold, the group that included Paul McCartney's brother Michael. This will be a 5 CD, 1 DVD set on the cherry red label. It features all the recordings made by the group, called A Box of Scaffold. April 25th for that. You might recall that back when Rosalind Carter passed away, Garth Brooks and wife Trish Yearwood performed John Lennon's Imagine at their funeral. Well, at former President Carter's funeral, the two of them did the same. A nice performance with Garth on acoustic guitar. Apparently, it was one of Jimmy Carter's favorite songs, Imagine, so it was performed there. Also, Peter Asher announced that he will be touring the UK in October this year with the legendary Graham Nash, 11
Oh,
days in total, including the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic. For more information, you can visit grahamnash.com. Podbean.com. A reminder that Pete Best is about to do 4 concert dates in New England from March 20th to the 23rd. I would highly recommend it if you ever want to see Pete Best. He rarely performs these days. Um, he is, I believe, 82 years old now. March 20th at the Aura Stage in Portland, Maine. You can go see him, Allan.
I might.
That shouldn't be too far. March 21st, United Theater in Westerly, Rhode Island. March 22nd, Tupelo Music Hall in Derry, New Hampshire. And March 23rd, the Strand Theater in Hudson, New York. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Please try to see Pete Best. Some major passings to note here. First, of course, there's David Lynch. The famous director was known for his work on films like Blue Velvet, The Elephant Man, and Mulholland Drive, as well as the TV series for Twin Peaks. He was a follower of transcendental meditation since 1973, and he started his own foundation, which funded meditation classes, which was established to help finance scholarships for students in middle and high schools who are interested in learning transcendental meditation and to fund research on the technique and its effects on learning. It also funded meditation classes for veterans and other at-risk populations. In 2009, there was a benefit concert for the David Lynch Foundation called Change Begins Within. Should have worn that. I have a shirt for that in my bedroom here. I wasn't thinking. Took place at Radio City Music Hall, and Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr performed along with Sheryl Crow, Eddie Vedder, Donovan, Mike Love, and others. A major highlight was Paul performing Cosmically Conscious at the show, with Ringo joining him on drums. David Lynch was a lifelong smoker. He died from complications from emphysema after being evacuated from his Los Angeles home from the California wildfires on January the 15th. He was 78. Ringo Starr was quoted as saying, "God bless David Lynch, peace and love to all his family, peace and love." And actually, James McCartney was quoted on his Facebook page. He said, "David Lynch was a very peaceful meditator who I met a while back, spreading the word together. A loss for us, but a gain for him as he is in a higher heaven, May he radiate bliss consciousness. Peaceful heavenly birthday. Rest easy, David." Also, Garth Hudson,
Hmm.
last living original member of the band, died at the age of 87. The Beatles have connections. George Harrison said the song "All Things Must Pass" was influenced by the band. Members of the band appeared on Ringo's recording written by George Harrison of "Sunshine Life for Me," "Sail Away Raymond," on his classic album Ringo, and just a few months ago, the song appeared as a bonus track with George on lead vocals on the Living in the Material World box set with the band, the same band members backing him up. And of course, Ringo Starr participated drumming on the band's final concert, The Last Waltz. Other members of the band were members of Ringo's All-Star Band, including Levon Helm and Rick Danko. And I have to thank a listener who went under the name Bluebird that informed me on my YouTube channel that Ed Mottau had died. Ed played acoustic guitar on John's Walls and Bridges album, and he also played on the New York sessions on John's rock and roll album. He performed with John and Yoko at the Attica State Concert, at the Apollo, and at the John Sinclair Freedom Rally in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I had no idea he passed away, and this was actually in November. Ed was a sought-after session musician in New York and Los Angeles. He also produced Paul Stuckey's first solo album and co-produced Paul's last album in 2022. And I had the chance to actually interview Ed on my YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio. This was 2 years ago. Was a delightful gentleman. If you can, check it out. Some insights about recording with John Lennon that you probably never heard before from Ed Mottau. Kind of ironic I bring up Paul Stuckey because Peter Yarrow also passed away a few weeks ago. And would either of you know, and maybe we'll will pose this to our viewers right now, but I always remember seeing that photo of the Beatles, all four of them, with Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Ed Sullivan. Sure you've all seen this. And Peter, Paul, and Mary were never on the same show with the Beatles. So I'm wondering where that came from. It must have been backstage at the Ed Sullivan show, but if anyone knows, please let us know.
I know.
Okay. Well, I always love Peter, Paul, and Mary. I've mentioned them several times in my podcasts. Another tremendous loss. So much history with their music and all they did for various charitable causes and civil rights. Very sad to hear about Peter Yarrow. Then finally, Christian Jutner has died. Christian was a child actor who appeared in the 1979 movie I Want to Hold Your Hand, who had a Beatles haircut. And his parents were trying to get him to get a real haircut. He was trying to get to see the Beatles for their debut on the Ed Sullivan Show. He died of natural causes on November 29th, only 60 years old.
Hmm.
We say happy birthday to Eric Stewart, known best for being a member of 10cc. Eric played on Paul's albums of Tug of War, Pipes of Peace. He appeared in the movie and soundtrack for Give My Regards to Broad Street. And, of course, he wrote songs with Paul for his Press to Play album, including some fine songs like Stranglehold, Footprints, and Tough on a Tightrope. On January 20th, Eric hit the big 8-0. Happy birthday, Eric Stewart. And then finally, two TV alerts. This Sunday, the Grammy Awards takes place. The Beatles are up for two nominations for their song Now and Then, for Record of the Year and Best Rock Performance. And don't forget, John Lennon's Mind Games was also nominated for Best Boxed or Special Limited Edition Packaging. And that's this Sunday night, the Grammy Awards. Two following Sunday nights, February 16th, it's the 50th anniversary TV special for Saturday Night Live. I have seen TV commercials for it, and Paul is in those commercials. So I'm figuring maybe some of the comedy sketches or any of his music performances might be in there. But that's on February the 16th. And there you have quite a lot of news right there, all packed together for our show.
There was a little bit of Paul last night on the, Ladies and Gentlemen, the Music of Saturday Night Live
Mm.
documentary that Questlove produced. Um, Played Hey Jude, parts of it. And they had a bit of the Chris Farley interview
Oh,
with
yeah.
him. Uh, and I was actually there for that show in the studio.
Oh, wow.
Saw that show live. Um, And yeah, they didn't show a lot of complete performances because I think they had it was a 3 hour documentary. They wanted to get through as much as possible. And Questlove did some incredible mashups, I mean, you're seeing the video and hearing the audio, and you're hearing audio of two different performances going on at the same time. I was very impressed. I mean, simply as, thinking in terms of the editing and mixing that had to be done to make that work. Um, but yeah, Paul made a couple of little appearances, not too much, but there was also a shot of him in the audience. There was one of the shows, I can't remember which one it was, where he appeared and they had him as an audience member, reacting to someone. So he turned up a few times, for people who
There's one time when Adam Sandler was on and he was singing a song of his, and then Paul sang a little bit to it. You know, it,
Well,
Mhm.
not in the excerpt they showed, but and I couldn't place it. But anyway,
yeah, it was a
And this is the Questlove documentary you're talking about?
yeah.
Because I think that's available, I want to say in Peacock, streaming, I believe.
well, I
Anyway,
guess
the greatest
you were
line
there.
there, Chris Farley
Yeah.
with the, remember when you were in the Beatles?
What was funny about that? That was those in the days when Beatles Monthly had a current news. What they did is they sort of reissued the original Beatles Monthlies from the '60s with a wraparound with contemporary stuff, including current news. And whoever wrote up the the thing about Paul's appearance on Saturday Night Live, just obviously didn't understand what Saturday Night Live was and what the sketches were because they criticized the interview as being incredibly stupid and not
Hmm.
ironically. They sort of took it as if it was a straight interview, a real interview. Um, yeah, these things happen.
Well,
You can only imagine that Paul's been through interviews just like that, where every question is about the Beatles, and here he is, calm and collected. You doing all right, Chris? You know, you
when I
doing?
interviewed Sting, that was how I broke the ice because I was a little bit of a nervous Nelly, and the interview was in his dressing room at the Beacon Theater. So I started off. I said, "Remember when you were in the police? That was cool." And he busted up laughing, and I was like, "Ah, exhale," you know.
That was a great
Um,
skit.
anyway, nice news, Ken. Good job.
Okay. So
Okay.
now we'll talk about the winners of
Oh
the
yeah,
yeah, so
book
we have
winners.
a
Book.
contest for a copy of the blue one, McCartney Legacy Vol.2, 1974 to 1980. Uh, and we had two trivia questions. Well, one trivia
Yes.
question with two answers.
Right.
Um,
So
You
what we
had
had the first off the trivia questions were which two live Wing songs were released as singles and were both top 10 hits in the United States
on the Billboard charts.
on the Billboard charts, right? And the answers were Maybe I'm Amazed, which came out as a single in February 1977 off
Right.
of Wings Over America, and it reached number 10.
Right.
Which is interesting because Maybe I'm Amazed, the original solo version, the better known version, I think over time, Paul's solo version is probably better known. That was not a single, was not a hit. It was Wings' live version. It went top 10 in 1977. And then in 1980, coming up live at Glasgow, excuse me, went to number one, which was interesting because it came out as one of two B-sides, one of two songs on the B-side of the coming up single, which was the solo version of McCartney 2. But here in the US, enough radio stations, if not all radio stations, turned the record over and played Wings' live version. Um, that was recorded in the late 79, and that went to number one. I don't know how that worked with the Billboard chart, if both sides of that single were considered number ones, or if it was solely the live version from Wings that was the number one. But
It's
either
always
way,
listed as the live one was number one.
the live version from of Coming Up was Wings, and it was a number one, and that was the other top 10 hit on Billboard
Right.
from Wings live. Now, some interesting, I wanted to just point out a few people, some of the incorrect answers that were brought up here, and maybe clarify with some of the folks that might have been a little confused. Um, um, let me see here. At some point somebody pointed out that Soily and the Mess were live songs. Uh, and because My Love was a number one single in 73 and Soily was the Mess was the B-side, and Maybe I'm Amazed was B-side was Soily and was a top 10 hit. The B-sides also are considered hits.
That's
No,
not true.
not the case.
It's
There
only
are, of course, double A sides where, and that tended to happen more so in the 60s, where I guess a record company would declare that the B side, was to be treated as an A side. I never understood how that worked. But in the case of My Love with the Mess on the B side, which was live, and Maybe I'm Amazed live, and Soily live on the B side, those two songs were not charting songs.
right. Not only
So,
that, they didn't get airplay.
right,
I don't ever remember hearing the mess on the radio, and Soily, maybe some rock stations were playing it, but not on hit radio.
right.
It's only the A sides that got
And someone else pointed out Coming Up in Freedom. Well, Coming Up was right. Freedom was a single and it was live. Didn't, if it charted, it did not come anywhere near top 10.
It charted, I think, in the 90s on Billboard's Hot 100.
And there were some other left field guesses that, I scratched my head a little bit, but those ones I wanted to clarify because they were interesting picks. Somebody even went with the album One Hand Clapping. But anyway, the correct answers were Maybe I'm Amazing coming up, and I want to congratulate our winners, picked at random out of Baltimore, Maryland, Douglas Zanner. Congratulations to Dave Kuntz in Covington, Washington, and Peter Dobson in Irving, Texas. They are the winners, and all three of you will be getting a copy of the Blue Book, the McCartney Legacy Vol.2, 1974 to 80. So congratulations to Peter and to Dave and to Douglas, and thanks to everyone who participated. We appreciate it, and we'll hopefully be doing more of these in the future.
And if any of you are coming to Fest, Adrian and I will sign them for you.
All right.
You can still win a copy of the McCartney Legacy Vol.2 on my website with my ongoing Beatles trivia.
And this was open, by the way.
If you bring that to Fest, we'll sign it too.
And the contest, we kept it open almost the entire, I think it was pretty much a month. So we were collecting entries from folks who were watching our two McCartney Legacy shows. So a lot of good folks contributed, and again, Peter, Dave, and Douglas, congratulations.
All right.
Okay, so the next part, swirly thing, is Ken telling us about Nashville.
Well, I went to go to both of the shows, and they were pretty much identical. Great performances. I think the first show was a little bit looser than the second. The second show was as perfect as it could be. Before I talk about the performance, I want to mention something that was pretty cool. Right outside the Ryman on the street, there was a mini truck that drove by, and they had the front cover of Ringo's Look Up album. And on the side of the truck, they showed part of the video for Look Up. And it drove around, and it was really cool that they actually showed something like this. And it drove throughout the streets of Nashville, but I think for only that day, which I think was the first of the 2 days, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, just shows that there was some effort there put into the promotion in the town. But the concerts, I really enjoyed a lot. I was kind of surprised at the format of it because we weren't told what kind of concert this would be, other than the fact that Ringo would be showcasing some songs from the new album. I didn't know if it would be musicians from the album. I certainly didn't think that it would be the All-Star Band backing him up. I didn't know if it would be mainly Nashville musicians, but it turns out that many of the people that are on Look Up were there, and it was a combination of Ringo doing his own songs, in most cases singing them up front. He only drummed on 2 songs throughout the entire show. But all the other performers did songs that Ringo recorded and sang lead to, except one song, which was, I understand why they did it, but there was a performance of I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, which had Sheryl Crow doing it. And was it Molly Tuttle? Molly Tuttle. Okay, and it was a great performance, but Ringo didn't sing lead to that in the Beatles. So I'm wondering why they chose that one, other than the fact that it's a country song. It could be put in that, in that category right there. And even T-Bone Burnett, who emceed the shows, actually said that he thinks that I Don't Want to Spoil the Party is the first example of a rock band doing a country song on an album. That's open for debate. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Because Beatles for Sale, a lot of the stuff like I'm a Loser has some country feel to it. The Carl Perkins.
I don't know. Follow the Sun goes back to 1960 at least, because we've got the
Right.
rehearsal tapes from back then. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's the same album. So I just don't know if any other bands were doing that early in 64, rock bands in particular. But all the performances from all the other artists were absolutely superb. And just like I believe that when you see the All-Star Band in concert, yes, the main attraction is Ringo. But there are a lot of younger people that will go to the All-Star Band and not know that Steve Lukather is in Toto and not know that Colin Hay was in Men at Work or that Hamish Stewart was in the Average White Band and may not even know those songs in those bands. This is a good education for people who don't listen to country music to
Mm.
know who Billy Strings is and to know who Molly Tuttle is and these other performers that were there on stage. And I was really blown away by it. And, you really get to see up front what a great guitarist Billy Strings is. I mean, there's a performance that he did of Honey Don't, and his fingers are flying all over the place, and in a way where his solos are very musical. It's not just showing off. It just makes perfect sense what he was playing there. Um, there was quite a lot of representation of Ringo's Beatles material. And, I think more Beatles than his solo stuff. Um, but definitely the fact that every performer who was there did an outstanding job. I don't know how much rehearsing there was, but it was completely polished and the musicianship was superb from everybody involved. I kind of question why did T-Bone Burnett, who plays on Look Up and plays on most of the songs, I think, on Look Up, didn't perform at all. He was strictly the MC for the show. But one of the great surprises for me, there are two songs that were done that I wouldn't have expected to be covered. And one of them was You Don't Know Me at All from Ringo's Rotogravure. And the singer who did that song, want to make sure I get her name right, is Mickey Guyton. This was a woman who gave it more of an R&B ballady feel to it. And her voice was so powerful. It was a completely different arrangement. I never thought of You Don't Know Me at All as a country song. I don't know why they picked that one, but it was a favorite of hers and she decided to do it, and it blew me away. It was one of the greatest performances of the evening. Also, you had Jamie Johnson there, and he pulled out Have You Seen My Baby? And it was a slightly slower version of the song, and it was fine. And, all the performances you had, like I said, Billy Strings there. Oh, talk about obscure. The group The War and Treaty, man and woman there, did
Husband and wife.
husband and wife. Okay.
Mm.
Um, do you play them on FUV?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
More about them than I do. Anyway, but they did Without Her, which is from Ringo's Bukus of Blues album. And that
Nice.
was also done as a ballad. And the husband was playing the piano, playing it beautifully.
Mm.
And I swear, even though I know Bukus of Blues as an album, when I first heard the song, I didn't recognize it. It was such a completely different arrangement. But it's nice that they acknowledge the Bukus
Right.
of Blues album that way. I kind of wish Ringo had done that. Um, Also, the three songs that Ringo chose to do from Look Up happened to be, you could probably guess the ones, Time on My Hands, Thankful, and the title track to Look Up. They were all performed really well. And Ringo's voice was just aces, nailing those songs. One of the things that we'll talk about where the album is concerned is that Ringo sounds so comfortable doing these songs. They're in just the right range for him. He sounds so natural doing them, very comfortable doing them. And he's staring a lot at the teleprompter just to make sure that he gets the words right because he's never done these songs live before. But the band that they had was absolutely outstanding. They had a guy that played slide guitar. I wish I had his name here in front of me, but the playing of that, it was when you hear that kind of playing, it really takes you back to more old school country music. And I don't know how the two of you feel about the new album because and we'll talk about this later, it didn't sound necessarily like old country to me. It's more contemporary, but not extremely slick, kind of. But Ringo did. He started the concert with Matchbox. Jack White was there to play guitar on the song. Jack White also later did Don't Pass Me By. Um, After that, Ringo did It Don't Come Easy, then Time on My Hands, then Octopus's Garden. That was Molly Tuttle doing that. Ringo was off stage. Then, as I said, Jack White did Don't Pass Me By. Ringo was off stage. Then Larkin Poe backed up Ringo on Thankful, which came out just fine. In many ways, it sounded pretty close to the darn record. Honey Don't was in there, as I said, Billy Strings, fantastic performance. Then Without Her from War and Treaty. Then I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, Sheryl Crow and Molly Tuttle. Then Ringo did Boys, and he went behind the drums, as he always does, and sang that one as well. Sheryl Crow was on stage for that. And Larkin Poe and Molly Tuttle were there as well on stage. Then they did a second set. It opened with Have You Seen My Baby with Jamie Johnson. Ringo off stage. You Don't Know Me at All. Mickey Guyton. Ringo was off stage. Act Naturally was Rodney Crowell
Hmm.
was there to sing that with Sarah Jaros. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Jerose.
Jaros. Okay. Then
Jerose.
Ringo was off stage for that. Then Ringo came back. And oh no, I'm sorry. I Want to Be Your Man was the next one. Larkin Poe did that. Ringo was still off stage. Then this was a nice surprise. What Goes On? Now Ringo's done What Goes On with the All-Star Band, but he's always up front singing it. He actually drummed to it, which he's never done live before.
Yeah.
And that was with Molly Tuttle on lead vocals and with Billy Strings playing guitar on that. Then Ringo went up front and did Look Up. Then he did Photograph with Billy Strings on stage. Yellow Submarine, everybody stood up in the audience for that. Emmylou Harris was on stage for that. There was a big crowd that came out. Sheryl Crow. Brenda Lee came up stage. She's got to be, I think, is she 80 years old now? She's the shortest person on the stage here by far. And Billy Strings and Jack White were there for that. And then they closed with a little help from my friends. And contrary to what Ringo has said in previous interviews, he was hinting he might do a country version of With a Little Help from My Friends. It wasn't. It was the same version we've always heard. And everybody joined him on stage. Emmylou Harris, Sheryl Crow, Brenda Lee, Billy Strings, Jack White, Molly Tuttle, Larkin Poe, Jamie Johnson, Sarah
Jerose, yeah.
Jaros, and Rodney Crowell. One other surprise was that Jim Keltner drummed on the second show. He was the main drummer on that show, and he wasn't there on the first one. And so the only thing disappointing to me about the show was that Ringo wasn't on stage enough. And it was the perfect opportunity for Ringo to drum to songs that we haven't seen him drum before. You've got Octopus's Garden there, and I'm happy that Ringo has been doing it recently with the All-Star Band. He could have just drummed without singing it. Instead, he was backstage. Same thing with Don't Pass Me By. When Ringo has done Don't Pass Me By live with the All-Stars, he starts off singing it and playing the piano, and then he comes up front and sings it. So there's opportunities there. Same thing with I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. And not only would I have liked to have seen Ringo drum a bit more, it would have been really cool for Ringo and Jim to be together more on stage for a reunion of those two drummers.
Right.
So, but in terms of the actual performance, it was as flawless as it could possibly be for the second show. And I'm not sure if what they're going to do is just pick the best performances between the two shows for the CBS broadcast, or they could actually just run the second show, as far as I'm concerned. But I was really pleased overall with the format. I only wish that Ringo had done a little bit more. I wish he did a bit more from the new album.
Yeah.
3 songs was it. It would have been nice if he acknowledged Bukusa Blues or any other country song from his solo career and did that. And I only hope that when he resumes touring with the All-Stars, he doesn't neglect to look up. He should at the very least do Time on My Hands because it came out so perfectly. And, I can't say enough about Ringo feeling comfortable doing this. They make a big deal out of the fact that Ringo has been doing this kind of music for 60 years now. And yeah, it's there on the Beatles music. A lot of his solo music has country tunes. I wish he would do Cryin', which is one of my favorite Ringo songs from his solo career, which is on Ringo's Rotogravure. He wrote that with Vinnie Poncia. Great country song. Would have fit perfectly on this. Lots of opportunities there for Ringo to showcase more of the country music. But instead, this was a combination of Ringo promoting the new album and everybody else saluting him and acknowledging his country roots from the
Mhm.
past, Beatles and solo. So I think when this TV special airs in March, I think you're going to be very pleasantly surprised by all the performances.
How long were the shows, and was there an intermission?
There was an intermission. It was usually about 20 minutes, and it took about 2 hours altogether, both nights.
And did they have like exclusive merch for those shows,
They had, I
or was
counted,
it just
there were 8 different T-shirts, and I don't, well, there's actually one that listed on the back, the 2 concerts for the Ryman. And I think they mentioned the Grand Ole Opry on there. I'm not sure. That was on the back of the shirt. There were some Peace and Love shirts. There were a few Look Up shirts, but there were 8 shirts altogether. They usually ran about $40.
yeah.
There was a program booklet, which was really an all-star band booklet from many years back already that they were trying to sell. Um, and there were a couple of caps
Right.
you could buy, but not so much about it being at the Ryman.
And so I guess Lucius was not at the show, did not perform.
Um,
You
I
would have mentioned them because
so.
yeah,
I,
Holly Lace. The album actually is, I believe, Lucius is actually a band, and the two lead singers are Holly Lasig and Jess Wolfe, and they have been working with so many people, and they get referred to as Lucius. If I was one of the guys in the band, I'd be like, "Hey, how about me?" But I think it's just Holly and Jess that are on. I know they're on Comeback on the new album, and I was curious if they were part of maybe just backing vocalists for the concert, but I guess not.
no, and actually now I have some notes here that of the backing musicians on there. Paul Franklin is one of the musicians listed, and I know he's primarily playing a lot of slide guitar on Look Up. So he's the guy that did amazing work on the slide. Um,
David Mansfield.
David Mansfield is listed. Mike Rojas, who I think plays the piano on You Want Some on the new album. I think that's Mike. Daniel Tashian was playing, and he plays all throughout the album of Look Up. There's a lot of guitar work throughout, I think, almost every song. Dennis Crouch, Jim Keltner. Okay, but that's how I felt about it. Just really pleased, knowing this is something that, is historical.
Yeah.
Because, I would love to, and I've said for many years on going back to when I was on Fab Forum, Ringo should have an all-star country band. I wish he would do something like that.
Yeah.
Have people like Willie Nelson, who's only 91, he can still do it. People like Rodney Crowell, who he knows. There's a lot of people who would love to in the
Yeah.
country field tour with Ringo. Maybe do it once. That
Well,
would be,
I'll love it.
well,
That
I
would be
love it.
fun. Did T-Bone Burnett stand next to Brenda Lee? I'm just curious about the size difference of having the two of them near each other.
Yeah,
Because
she's
T-Bone Burnett's like 9 feet tall or something.
But no, it's funny when you see everybody on stage and there's Brenda Lee and she's like half the size of everybody else. She looked a little bewildered.
Yeah.
That she was there to sing with Little Help from My Friends and sing along with the Yellow Submarine. But it's great to have someone who's, country legend, pop legend like that there on stage. Uh, yeah, I interviewed Brenda many years ago. She was really a wonderful person, and she even talked about the Beatles. And because I always try to work the Beatles into all my interviews, and she actually said to me that when she was with Decca, she was trying to get the label to sign them because she had heard their music. I forget how exactly. Maybe she met them at one point, but she really thought that they had something, but she couldn't get people at Decca. She couldn't convince them to sign the Beatles. But she was definitely in the Beatles' corner.
Interesting. Very cool. And there was a lot of Beatle people there. I know that.
Yep.
From
Frangione was there.
yeah.
Scott O'Rourke, one of our regular listeners, was there. Um, trying to think.
It's funny. People have asked me why I didn't go, and I'm an idiot. That's one reason why. Um, it was funny because I think when the announcement was made that the album was coming out, I got caught up with the album and what reading it and it just didn't click to look into how tickets were being sold for the Ryman shows, or I was waiting for some big formal announcement, tickets are on sale, and didn't see one. And next thing I know, people are talking about going down to Nashville, and I'm like, oh, something tells me I blew it, and I did. So,
Hmm.
but
I just remembered Jeremy Portoralla, who's one of our regular listeners. He was there.
mhm,
Mark and Carol Lapidus were there.
that right, yeah.
Um, Joyce Wemmer, who's a regular fan of our show, was there. Um, yeah, I'm trying to
Allan
remember.
wasn't there.
No, he wasn't.
Allan was not there.
Yeah. Well, he's waiting for Pete Best in Portland. So,
Right. All right. Well, the album,
yeah.
Yeah.
and what an album.
Okay, we'll start
And
with you, Darren.
I tell you, you never would have, and you never would have thought that Ringo doing a country album or Ringo just going back to the LP format would generate this kind of attention in 2025. Um, we know that there's a very hard, and we're part of it, a hardcore base of fans that has stuck with Ringo, the solo artist. And, you know, there aren't too many people that you'll drive past that you'll hear the Why Not album blasting out of their car,
Mm.
you know, but I'll play it. It's not that many of them. I never expected Look Up to just generate this sort of interest, and it is very, very deserving, and it is not a stretch of saying that it easily fits in amongst Ringo's best albums. Um, and it's also because it just sounds really good.
Mm.
And it's a very different album from Bukus of Blues. They're both country albums, but of course they were all recorded, 50 years apart. I've always thought Bukus of Blues had I always thought of that as a country and western album. It really reminded me of country music as it sounded in the early 60s, late 50s. And it had a very old school, kind of buttoned up country feel to it. This is a little looser. This is more contemporary. There are even a couple of songs on the album that really are just country-ish. They're not really, straight ahead. Oh, obviously that's a country song on here. So the two albums are very different. If you played them together side by side, if you've never done that before, you definitely could tell one's contemporary and one is very much steeped in tradition, Nashville traditions. and that was the first album. Um, I was a little surprised. Actually, I should have said this before, that Ringo didn't do more of these songs in the show.
Hmm.
But it sounds to me like they were trying to plug the album, but also bridge the gap between the contemporary country music and uh, old rock legends and like Ringo, and make the connection between what Ringo and others growing up in England were hearing coming over from the States and what that now has become here in this century. But yeah, back to the album. This is a perfect example of what happens when Ringo has the right collaborator. There's no surprise Ringo Starr really needs to have a person or a team of people that he's comfortable with to write songs together, bounce ideas off, and then know in the studio how to, find Ringo's strengths and emphasize those. We saw it with Richard Perry. Um, please refresh my memory. Ringo's Rotogravure, who produced that? Was that
Aries,
Perry? No,
uh,
that was all right. See, okay, there was a reason why Ringo's Rotogravure, which was sort of cut from the same cloth as Ringo and Goodnight Vienna, but it didn't work as well and didn't hold together as well and was nowhere near as successful as the first two albums. And I think that's largely because Richard Perry got it when it came to Ringo. We saw that again with Mark Hudson. I know that when Ringo and Mark Hudson parted company, a lot of people felt that it was going to be refreshing to hear Ringo without the Mark Hudson influence. But as time has gone by, I've missed Mark's involvement more and more because Ringo got the whole Beatles. I'm sorry, Mark got the whole Beatle thing and the sound and bringing out Ringo's strengths and making the Beatles sound and Ringo sound very contemporary today. And it was something, as good as his albums have been since he stopped working with Mark Hudson, they're never quite as meaty and substantial as Choose Love or Ringo Rama has been, I feel. And now with Look Up, here is the same thing. The Ringo T-Bone Burnett connection works brilliantly. And I don't know if they discussed going into the project. When Ringo says that he knew T-Bone, in fact, he told the story. There was a press conference that was held. It was a webinar kind of press conference via Zoom that took place right before the second show. It was like at 5:30 on stage at the Ryman before the second concert, and it was with Ringo and T-Bone Burnett. And Ringo tells a story on how he met T-Bone. Ringo was living in LA and T-Bone was in LA. And Ringo says, I used to throw a lot of parties and T-Bone would be at all of them, even though he wasn't invited to any of them, which was pretty funny. And so they knew each other from back then. And T-Bone Burnett was in a band, which they didn't mention, called the Alpha Band in the late 70s, second half of the 70s. And Ringo played drums on at least one of their albums, a few songs on one of their albums. And they talked about their connection in this press conference. And you just wish that Ringo and T-Bone Burnett would have worked together more over the years. And I wonder if we might get more out of their collaboration because T-Bone, oh, I know what my question was. I don't know if they approached this as it being a country album or EP maybe at the beginning. T-Bone, I want to do all country. I know T-Bone had one song which knocked Ringo out, and it grew from there. And so, was it a natural? Was it natural? Was it something that came together naturally, where T-Bone wrote these country-ish songs, and Ringo realized, let's make it a full album of country-sounding material? Or if it's something Ringo approached saying, I want to do this type of EP, which then became an album. Because however it came together, it was so natural, Ringo and T-Bone Burnett, that I hope they work together again, because it's really what T-Bone brought to the table in the way of production, assembling the musicians, writing the songs, writing the right kind of songs for Ringo that makes Look Up such a terrific album. There aren't, in my opinion, that many songs that jump off, and I would say that's the hit. If this came out in 75, this would be a hit. It's all consistently top notch. And maybe the title track, maybe Time on My Hands, a little bit rises, but it's a consistently enjoyable listen. And, you know, I didn't see this coming. I just thought, if Ringo does country stuff, if he ever does that, it'll just be country sounding and that's it. T-Bone Burnett turned it into a really legitimately important album.
I think, we when we had Gary Burr on long ago, he talked about writing a song with Ringo that was supposed to be for a country project, and um, that was before I think we heard anything about T-Bone Burnett. Doesn't mean that he wasn't involved, but my impression was that the idea of doing a country album, I think he even used the word, not EP, uh, sort of predates T-Bone's involvement. I could be wrong about that, but it
It might. Yeah.
seems to go back a long way, you know.
I'd have to go back and listen to our interview with Gary, but I know that he said he gave a song to Ringo, and originally it was going to be on this album.
Mhm.
So the plans were changed for that. You got 11 songs on there, one of which, thankful, is Ringo and Bruce Sugar that wrote it together. And of the other 10, um, T-Bone wrote or co-wrote almost all of them.
Yeah.
Billy Swan actually wrote or co-wrote two of them. And so I guess Ringo felt that maybe, with T-Bone doing most of the work, producing and playing on it, maybe you should go with his songs. The one thing that I'm most curious about, and I'm not sure if Ringo has covered this in any of his interviews, is whether or not, and the way that I heard it was that T-Bone presented him with a song, and Ringo was really knocked out,
Right.
and Ringo said, "Have you got any more songs?" And T-Bone said, "Yeah, I got 10 of them," or something like that. So it seemed like the songs that T-Bone wrote may not have been with Ringo in mind. So that's something I'd like to know if he really
Yeah.
thought about Ringo doing any of this material.
Of course,
But
an album that runs like 35 minutes or so could have had room for the Gary
We-
Burr
Well,
composition.
you know what,
They
Alan?
could just be saving it for the archival box set.
Huh. You know what I noticed though, Alan? And I notice this a lot, and I don't know of how conscious. I don't know if this is, why this is happening, but it seems like a lot of artists are releasing shorter albums, whether or not it's the whole EP effect and the lack of a focus or attention, people with short attention spans. And EP started to pop up, and Ringo decided he was going to ditch the album format and make shorter records and make EPs. But it seems I notice a lot of artists today are sticking to a 40-minute and less format, almost as if, and maybe it's because of vinyl. Maybe it's because vinyl. I don't know if overall if vinyl has actually surpassed CDs in sales. But it could be because of vinyl that they're, keeping the length of these things back down to what they sort of were 50 years ago.
Right. You know,
Because remember when CDs came out, every album suddenly became a double album length, and it was like most of them you couldn't listen to in one sitting because there wasn't enough material to fill out a 75-minute album. Because everyone was doing them.
I can't remember who it was, but it was one of Ringo's producers in maybe the 90s. And I interviewed him, and I said, I don't understand really why this album, which is, I don't think there was even a vinyl release at the time. It was just out on CD. It was like 35 minutes. It's sort of like LP length. And this producer said, well, you know, a lot more than that people just don't want to hear. You had a vinyl record and you listened to one side of it, and then later you
Right.
came and you listened to the other side, and so that's 20 minutes at a time. And so I don't really think that having more on it just because the CD format can hold it makes sense. And
I
I,
agree
I,
with
I
that.
don't know, at the time I found that a very spurious argument.
Well, I think it was Why Not or Ringo. No, no, no. Ringo 2012 is might not even be 30 minutes long. And it's kind of weird because it was that one album is super short.
Mhm.
And the other ones that Ringo was doing at that time were pretty much an average length. But sometimes less is more. And a lot of people don't like Ringo 2012. I like it a lot because the less is more really works.
Mhm.
You know,
But
the songs hit and it's over. And um, but no, they're getting shorter today. And I just remember when CDs really hit, every album you bought was over 60 minutes long, and most of them didn't need to be that long. And I would find it very tedious sometimes. Sitting down, I'd look and I go, "Oh, I love this guy, but 70 minutes, really?"
Apart from that, if you follow Ringo's entire solo career, I mean, the first two albums, Sentimental Journey and Blue Cruise the Blues, had 12 songs each. But then he followed this pattern of every album having 10 songs or maybe 11. I just think he got it into his head, 5 songs on each side. And most of his albums were that way until the Mark Hudson period, where he made him do more, like 13 or 14 songs. And then after Mark Hudson, after Liverpool 8, a lot of those albums were just 10 songs, you know?
I think that I think it could be taking the length of the CD, and a CD for maybe there are some people that don't realize this, but a compact disc can hold only, I mean, early on it was 78 or 79,
Hmm.
not even 79. It was more like 77 or 78 minutes of music and some odd sections before you literally would max out the disc. And then they figured out a way, I think, to milk it to get it close to 80. And initially artists were using all available space and cutting albums that were 75 minutes long and stuff. And sometimes, a lot of times, the artist did not have that enough material. And LPs, of course, at 20 minutes per side is 40 minutes. And even that, you begin pushing it.
Well, that's because people like me, critics, were raking them over the coals for not filling the space on a CD because we felt it was sort of a waste. But the way I look at it now is a little bit different. For a new album, maybe 40 minutes is about right. But for an album of unreleased outtakes, I want all 80 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's different. That's totally different. Yeah. I mean, how many albums? I'm trying to think of a good example without insulting. One album that comes to mind that I like a lot. We're getting off topic here, and it's my fault. I apologize very quickly. When XTC put out Oranges and Lemons,
Hmm.
an album I love from 1989, it was a single CD. If you bought the record, it was a double album. But something about getting the CD and putting it on after however long, 60 some odd minutes, was like, okay, I've heard enough XTC for now. There's a lot of these songs could have probably been lopped off. Um, That's that's an example that comes to mind how in the late 80s, early 90s, artists really started to spread it all out to take advantage of how much music could be fit. And, if a greatest hits album, you want them to pack it to the rafters, but
And some of them would end the album after 40 minutes, and then there'd be 15 minutes of silence, and then the hidden track.
the hidden track, yeah, there was some, yeah. I mean, one artist I remember did it like, remember the indexes on CD players, which, um, I think only I don't know, professional grade CD players you could actually queue up a track that might be maybe 10 minutes long, but it's indexed
Hmm.
and you could find the sub the like the but a lot of the home players that I had, you couldn't even, there was somebody that actually index number went up to 99
Hmm.
before the bonus track was at the end. Anyway, I apologize. I kind of started this, but back to look up. I was looking beyond, and I apologize. I will focus my looking.
So Ken, your
Uh,
reaction?
my thoughts on this album is that I'm really impressed with it. I sometimes frown on a lot of podcasts that just jump right in with an opinion after listening to the album once or twice, and that's it. And all of a sudden, this is the best album that Ringo's done since the Ringo album. Well, when you say that, you're also cutting down a lot of really good albums that he's done in between. But I have to say that I'm glad that I waited a while before I said anything because I had watched one podcast where they were really critical of the mix of this album and that the other musicians weren't mixed hot enough. And I started, when I listened first to Look Up, I listened in the car and I was kind of agreeing with that opinion. And I couldn't understand it because I'm in my car, the speakers are not that far apart. You'd think you'd hear everything on the record, and I didn't hear some of the guitar playing underneath, all the incredible playing from Billy Strings or the slide guitar parts that are on there, and they weren't hot enough. And certainly in You Want Some, there's some great honky tonk piano in there, and that wasn't hot enough. But then I listened with these on, and it made all the difference in the world. When you listen to this album with your headphones on, you hear everything. And the whole album breathes. And I think it was really wonderful production. I love the sound of Ringo's vocals all the way throughout. Um, I like the fact that I don't really hear any effects on his vocals. I don't really hear if there is any reverb or echo. I don't really think there is. I could be wrong. It all sounds very natural. There's even moments in there where his vocals are straining a little bit on higher notes. They leave it in there. It just sounds natural. And I love the way his drums were recorded here. You hear everything. And I like the way that Bruce Sugar, from the post Mark Hudson period, um, recorded Ringo's drums, but these are even a much fuller sound. You hear every fill, you hear the toms really, much louder and all these great fills. There's a drum roll at the very beginning of Rosetta. It's got so much punch to it. And when you do listen with your headphones on, you do hear all the instrumentation much better. Still don't know why it didn't work that well for me in the car. But when you listen more closely, the production is just stellar all throughout this album.
Mm.
And the songs, I think, are all very good. I don't know how many songs I would say are great, but I do think that Time on My Hands deserves classic status. I just think it was so perfectly done, really suited Ringo's vocals. Much has been said about Ringo and that he's not this great singer. I love Ringo's vocals, probably because I'm so used to it after all these years, but he has a personality and a charisma in his vocals and a warmth that he brings. And he knows that he doesn't have a great range. And all these songs are written in just the right range for him. So everything
Mm.
sounds natural and everything sounds comfortable. And all the songs really work for him. Um, I do kind of wish, minor complaint. Um, Never Let Me Go. I wish there was a little bit of more work done on the lyrics because the chorus is just never let me go, never let me go over and over and over.
Mm.
But it's still a very good, well-constructed song. And I love the instrumentation on it. The harmonica playing on Never Let Me Go makes a big difference in the song. Um, In fact, one of the things I like about Never Let Me Go is that there's a guitar part that's very Carl Perkins, George Harrison-esque. When you hear it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, and actually, you know what? Let me
And
just get
that's
the.
Billy Strings, right?
I think that was Billy Strings.
Yeah.
There are some notes here at the very beginning from Elvis Costello, who was listening to the album on a train ride to Liverpool. And I just want to read this one paragraph that he wrote here, which I think is very interesting. It kind of nails it on the head a little bit. Um, he writes, "It's as if you wrote a follow-up to Beatles for Sale and let Ringo sing all the songs without ever sounding it's trying to go back or a comeback for
Hmm,
Ringo."
interesting.
There are songs that with today's production, you could hear Ringo sing in the mid 60s in a way. But like I said, I don't really look at this as being a traditional country album, although there are songs with that slide guitar. When that's emphasized, it has an older country feel to it,
Yeah.
but it does sound much more contemporary and more Americana. There's a world of difference between this album and Buku's of Blues.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what you said, Darren. Buku's of Blues has a more traditional feel to it. It sounds like it could have been released in the 60s or early 70s, which it was, 1970. Um, I like the song You Want Some a lot, and I do like yeah, it is Mike Rojas. Does the honky tonk piano in there. Um, I like when Ringo does those kind of songs that have that country honky tonk feel to them. Um, Rosetta, incredible guitar playing on Rosetta. And I know that Billy Strings is on there. I believe that's him, but Joe Walsh is also on that song playing slide guitar. I love the playing on there. Um, Yeah, so it's a lot of great things. The blending of the vocals of Ringo with Molly Tuttle, they sound fantastic together in terms of the harmonies. Just like when Alison Krauss sings with Ringo on Thankful. There's something about Ringo's voice works very well with females when they sing together.
That's
And
the only thing where you were talking about the mix and another show, another podcast having an issue with the mix, which I don't agree with at all. I would have liked Allison's vocal to be a little more up front in the mix because she's got such a special voice. And if you don't know that's Alison Krauss, you could not realize that who's who the female vocalist is. She's a little too much in the background there. But again, that's a minute point observation that when I heard Thankful, I thought, too bad there isn't more Allison in this one.
well, actually, initially I said that I wasn't pleased with the mix when I heard it in the car, but when listening with the
Right.
headphones, I'm blown away by the mixing.
Yeah. I don't know what, that's probably, yeah, well, may have to do with again, the quality of the speaker versus your headphones. And I know that I've had that happen too. I just think such a perfect combination coming up with this type of music, having Ringo and T-Bone Burnett and T-Bone's expertise here. I'm also very thankful. I've always loved T-Bone Burnett's production, but I started, there was a time, I'd say it was maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, I felt like T-Bone Burnett was starting to produce everyone. And I was starting to get a little tired uh, I always started feeling like a T-Bone Burnett production. The drums sounded like they were being played underwater. They were very dampened. Um, and I hope I got his name right. I believe the guy that used to play drums a lot was Jay Belrose. And I hope I'm going to write that down and check to make sure that I'm right. And if I'm wrong, I'll burn my hand as a punishment. But he would tended to play the drums, and I know they would deaden the drums like Ringo used to do with the towel.
Mm.
And it was just becoming a quality that it was getting a little tiresome that everything T-Bone Burnett was working with had those muted drums. Even
Yeah.
Robert Plant's album Band of Joy, um, I fell a little victim to that, but Here. No, it's T-Bone, at his best again. And Ringo's drums are one of the highlights, his playing, like you pointed out, Ken.
Yeah.
I
No, if
think
you listen
actually,
to Ringo's drumming, you'll be
we're
very pleased with this album.
I think we're talking about why this one has gotten so much attention, and I kind of think that T-Bone Burnett's involvement has something to do with it. I mean, I know Ringo is the headliner and the Beatle and all that stuff, but T-Bone Burnett, I think, does have a following, and because of all the production that he's done over the years, and I think he's a figure who commands a great amount of respect, and these are. As Ken pointed out, almost every song is written or co-written by him, and there's the production. He's obviously thinking differently about drums than he had in the period that Darren's referring to, because the drums here sound fantastic. Um, I have a friend who had some complaints about. I mean, we had an email exchange, and it was generally about reverb and people's overuse of reverb and people's overuse of production techniques. And he was basically observing that hearing outtakes often is a lot more enjoyable than the finished product. And he was referring specifically to some George Harrison things where, sometimes the production on those things gets pretty thick. Um, but then he referred to this album as well, and I think he wasn't complaining so much about the reverb as, for instance, I think he found on Breathless, the opening track, Billy String's acoustic guitar. I think he wanted to hear, the pick on the strings, and he wasn't hearing that.
Hmm.
Um, I've listened to it now through speakers, headphones, and in the surround mix. And uh, I haven't had that problem with, I don't need to hear the pick on the string all the time. I thought that the acoustic guitar sounded very present and good. So I didn't have those issues. I'm just sort of passing along. This is another person's, an educated listener's point of view about the sound on this, since we were talking about the sound. I found the sound on the album overall really good, and I
Mm.
really like the, Paul Franklin's pedal steel playing, throughout, and otherwise, you know, to me, it's like I seem to have almost one reaction to Ringo albums, which is that, okay, we know and like and are used to Ringo's voice, and Ringo's voice is what Ringo's voice is, and he's not claiming it's anything more than it is. And we listen to people with much worse voices without worrying about it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a limited range and that kind of thing. And I think he uses it intelligently. He goes for material that is in that range, as I think Ken said, and that I think he can put over in a personable way. You hear these songs as performances with, some sort of interpretive spirit behind it. He's not just sort of walking in and singing the lyrics and leaving. You get the sense that there's some work going on here. Not to mention that, I think that a lot of work on the drums. I mean, I'm not saying overwork in terms of fussiness or anything like that, but they're pretty well thought out drum parts, and we don't always think of I don't know. I don't always think of drums in quite that way. I've been rethinking that pretty much since some of the Beatles reissues, and listening to Ringo's drumming far more closely than I ever had before, and thinking, this guy thinks orchestrally about drums. I mean, he's not just doing the beat. He's responding to the lyrics. He's doing all of those things that people credit him with, and there's a lot of that on this record too. In terms of the songs, though, comparatively few of them sort of stood out as, ones that I can, hum when I walk away from the album. And I've now heard it maybe 6 or 7 times. But a few do. I really like Thankful. It may be because it's the first one that he put out as a teaser, and so we've had it for a bit longer, but I just like the track, and I think it's a great closing track. If I were to, put together a Ringo Starr compilation tape with tracks from all of his albums, that would definitely be on it for this album.
Hmm.
I like Rosetta too. With Rosetta, I think we're talking about I mean, I know T-Bone wrote it and not Ringo, but I think we're talking about a little subliminal thing here with, Get Back and Rosetta. You
Yeah.
hear how many other Rosettas do you know apart from the Rosetta Stone?
Hmm.
you know. Uh, Also, I remember when the album was released and he put out the video for Look Up. There were a lot of people online saying, I don't, yeah, it's okay, but it's not the best song on the album. Why is he leading with Look Up? And I thought, oh, okay, I like Thankful a bit better, but listening to the album 6 or 7 times. Look Up actually is pretty good, and so is Breathless. Breathless is a really good opener too, partly because of those acoustic guitars that my friend was complaining about not getting to hear so, crisply. Uh, to me, they sound good. Time on My Hands too. I mean, pretty much the ones that you guys mentioned are also the ones that stand out for me. But top to bottom, the playing of the band, and that includes Ringo drumming, just sounded really tight to me and really
Hmm.
good. And, once again, I've said this before and it won't matter, but I think he should be playing more of his new music in his concerts, um, simply out of respect for his own work. I don't understand the wanting to be just an oldies act. He's doing a lot of work on these albums and EPs. Go out and play them for people. Come on.
Hmm.
Well, apparently he is affected by people getting up out of their seats and taking a bathroom break or a beer break. And they will do that for songs that they're not familiar with. And it's not so much a reflection of how good the songs are, they just don't know it.
Yeah, well, I think it's a reflection of those people.
I
You
agree
know,
with you.
maybe we should start a movement where when he starts doing it, don't come easy or something, we leave. And if everybody does that,
He'll just play the new stuff. That would be something.
And yet, you
all
know
of a sudden
what?
everyone leaves when Yellow Submarine starts.
It's the exact opposite with that song in particular, because no matter what show I've gone to of him, when he does Yellow Submarine, everybody stands up.
Right,
So it's got to make him feel good that he has that kind of a reaction. But I think
right.
he's afraid. He doesn't want, and Paul is the same way. He notices when people get up out of their seats. He's even mentioned it on stage.
Yeah, I know.
Not everyone's like Joe Jackson, who actually will make comments about people when they get up and they're walking around during his shows. One time I went to see him, he was complaining people showed up late. Come on, hurry up, get to your seat. We started without you, he said.
Did I mention on our show, and this is a very telling thing, I believe, but Ringo has talked about, and in fact, Elton John brought this up in his book that he had just put out. He did a show in 1975, and it was a multi-act show. A lot of different big names were on there, and Elton followed the Beach Boys, and he did some of his hits in the very beginning, but he had just put out Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. And then he announced to the crowd, "I'm going to do all the songs from the new album." And Ringo is sitting there in the audience, and he's sitting right next to Elton's mother.
And they
And
both,
after the third song, he's saying, "What the hell is this?" And he got up and walked out with his mother. Elton's mother walked out on her own son.
yeah. I mean, as a musician, I don't think Ringo should have admitted that publicly.
Yeah.
I really think, I mean, okay, fine. You go to a concert and you like the person who is performing and you like certain of their things an awful lot. Don't you trust them to give you some new stuff that you're going to like too? You know, it seems very disrespectful to me to the musicians. And that's why I'm sorry to hear Ringo telling that story too, because
Yeah.
he is a musician, come on. Uh, I don't know. I mean, as someone who has spent my life going to concerts, yeah, I want to hear the stuff I like, but I want to hear the new stuff too, and I don't know. I don't know when that stopped for people and why it stopped for people. But if you love music and you love musicians, you want to know what they're going to do,
Hmm.
and you want to know what they're going to do next. Look, let's say it's 1966, middle of 1966. We all go see the Beatles. And they decided, if they were able, to play Revolver. Are we going to get up and leave? I don't think so.
Hmm.
You know, I don't think that would have happened. Maybe it would have, but I doubt it. I mean, 1966, no one could hear them anyway, but you know what I'm saying.
I mean, I think
Unfortunately, there
back
are a
to
lot of
when, like, sorry,
there's
Ken.
a lot of Beatles fans out there that don't care about the new music that Ringo's doing or what Paul's doing, and they're there to see Paul do Beatles and maybe those classics from his solo career, like Band on the Run. Same thing with Ringo. You can do It Don't Come Easy. You could do Photograph, but a song from a new album that I haven't bought. It's a shame. It really is. And there's very little airplay on the radio of the new stuff. But if the artists themselves aren't playing it, how do you expect the music to sell at all? In fact, one of
Exactly.
the things that we've brought up here, I think, is that when you see Ringo in concert, rarely do you ever see his new album or new EP for sale at the shows. I didn't see Look Up available at the Ryman. There was a store outside the Ryman that was selling it. But you would think, hey, people are hearing his new stuff. They might be thinking now,
Yeah.
if they haven't heard it, they get the CD. And it wasn't there.
Interesting.
So it's very sad. You know, to me, if you're a fan, you don't have to love everything, but you should be interested in everything that the
Right.
artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Because
hopefully.
sometimes it's good and you'll be surprised and you might want to go buy the album that you did
Mhm.
buy.
Hmm.
I mean, touring was supposed to be promoting an album through the tour, which presumably meant that you play songs on the tour that are new to people and they say, "Hey, I like that one. I'm going to go get the record." What about that? What
Mhm.
happened?
Hey, look at Paul.
Or the days when, like, Pink Floyd would be performing The Dark Side of the Moon, or what would become The Dark Side of the Moon, in its entirety a year before the album ever came out. They
Hmm.
were test driving the new stuff
Mhm.
live. So they would play, this new thing. And they did the same thing with when After Dark Side came out. They were playing The Dark Side of the Moon, and they were playing these three very long new songs that they had that they were test driving for the next album. Today, I don't think that would go over too well.
I remember going to see Jethro Tull in the early 70s, probably around the time Benefit was out. And they played My God, which is a pretty long song, especially the way they played it because they had piano solos in it and all kinds of stuff. Totally new. I mean, it didn't come out until Aqualung. And when
Right.
it came out on Aqualung, I found it really disappointing because the live performances were so much better. And the
Hmm.
same thing with Led Zeppelin. I saw them. before Led Zeppelin 3 came out, although they obviously had finished and it was coming out a bit after the tour was over. They played Since I've Been Loving You, which I thought was just extraordinary. And, in those days, I used to accidentally tape all the concerts I went to. So I had, both of those songs for quite a while before they came out. And again, with, when Since I've Been Loving You came out on record, it sounded very wimpy to me compared with my tape. But still, here you've got two big bands devoting, those aren't short songs, either of them, taking a chunk of a concert and playing them, and everybody liked them, you know. I mean, and I couldn't when I saw they were on, when the next albums came out, is yeah, absolutely got to go get it,
Hmm.
you know.
A lot of people, as they get older, don't have the patience to sit
I
through.
know it's so listening, liking music, listening to music, people's tastes, day and night difference. It's amazing how it has changed. I'm sounding old now, but like, and I'll tell I'll talk to my kids about it, and they sort of get it. They're a little like me, but pretty much let's start laughing when I start talking about how you bought an album and you dissected it, and it's just, you went to see the band live and they were performing songs from the album, a lot of them, if not the entire album, and you didn't bat an eyelash. That's what you expected. Um, So, and now it's different. I kind of cut Paul and Ringo a little slack because the body of work that they have to condense into a show length makes it hard
Hmm.
to really sink their teeth into anything new. For them, I'll give them a little bit of a pass, but still, I mean, Ringo was doing Anthem. Why Anthem? I don't know, but he was doing Anthem even though he had one or two albums, newer albums out. What's My Name? I think I remember you saying this, Ken. The title track to What's My Name. You thought that was going to be something that was going to be a live track that they were going to get some mileage out of. And what's the other one? The On the Road.
Yeah,
We're on the
we're on
road
the road
again,
again.
which is on.
Uh,
Yeah,
Gotta think about that.
yeah. But
Uh,
that was it was almost like you listen to it. They wrote this to open up shows,
yeah. Not
and
only that, What's My Name was written by Colin Hay, who's
yeah.
in the band. Steve Lukather was the writer or the co-writer of We're on the Road Again, and he's there in the band. It's perfect for them to do that live. It just doesn't make any sense. But I'm convinced, having studied people, and you can't say everybody on the planet is this way. When you're young, especially when you're in your teens, the music is much more important to you. You absorb everything, you take it all in, and that music has the greatest impact on your life.
Hmm.
Adolescents, teens, maybe your 20s. The older you get, you can like some new music that's out there, but it'll never be the same experience as when you were younger. And as you get older and older, the new artists have to compete with the old artists that you've loved for 20, 30, 40 years, and it can't compare for a lot of people. I try to listen to a lot of new music that's out today, and some of it I do like, but I'll bet you anything, if I was 15 years old listening to the same new music, I'd like it a lot more and listen to
Hmm.
it a lot. It's a different experience when you get older. So,
Yeah.
but Ringo and Paul shouldn't take that out on the music to the point where they're not doing it. And when McCartney 3 came out, Paul did Women and Wives at a few shows, and that was it, you know? And this is for an album that got really good reviews. Now, Look Up is being praised, and I hope that Ringo is very happy with that to the point where he'll acknowledge it and at least do one song from it with the All-Stars.
Hmm.
Most of the time, everybody in the All-Stars now does old material. That's it.
Right.
Remember the days when the All-Star Band, in the middle of the show, there'd be one or two members that would just get a solo number with nobody else on stage?
Yeah.
He stopped doing that. Um, I know Edgar Winter had a chance to do Johnny Be Good because it was on his new album, but look, it's a classic song. Um, and Ringo doesn't do those things anymore, and everybody in the band plays songs that are proven, songs you
Mhm.
know and love, and sticks to that. So it's been a winning formula, and he probably doesn't want to stray too much from that. I don't think having one or two songs from the new album or songs that he's never done live before from his past, how that would kill it. He can get away with any Beatles song. He can get away with any Beatles song that he didn't sing lead to. People would love it.
Mhm.
Remember when he covered I Call Your Name? I thought he did a really good job on that.
Yeah.
Uh, You think the crowd wouldn't go crazy over that? He did it for a John Lennon tribute show. He sent a
Okay.
video in, and there was a band with Joe Walsh in there, I think Tom Petty. Yeah. So you don't think the crowd would love that? But, at the same time, cut him some slack. He's 84. I'm just happy he's out there doing what he loves doing and he's still making new music. And I
Right.
really hope that he does more with T-Bone. It's kind of like the Rick Rubin Johnny Cash association,
Hmm.
you know, is the right producer
Yeah.
for Johnny Cash.
Yeah. Good. Very good point. That's a very interesting point. Um, um, yeah, I hope they work together again. I mean, Look Up's a treat. I hope Ringo goes back to making albums. Not that the EP
Yeah.
thing, the way Ringo treated the EPs, it worked because he did put them out more often. And then again, I would say, but why don't you just put out anyway? But it was fun because you felt like you got a new EP and you knew another was probably coming, very soon. Um, so hopefully he sticks with the LP format. But even if you went back to EPs, more importantly, hopefully there's more there between with him and T-Bone. And if not T-Bone, then maybe a relationship is developed where Ringo might work with a Billy Strings more often, or um, boy, it would be special if we had Robert Plant and Alison Krauss. What if Ringo Starr and Alison Krauss
Hmm.
cut an album together? I mean, the Robert Plant and Alison Krauss albums
Mhm.
are terrific,
Yeah.
brilliant, even. T-Bone Burnett producing again.
Yeah.
Um, so I love Look Up. Like I say before, I don't know if I would say it's the Ringo album. I still think that's Ringo. But this definitely goes up there with the albums that I think are Ringo's best, which are Ringo, Time Takes Time,
Hmm.
um,
Mark Hudson.
Ringo Rama, Goodnight Vienna, Look Up, Choose Love. Those to me are the Vertical Man too.
Hmm.
Hmm. No, I agree. Definitely Ringo, Time Takes Time, Vertical Man, Ringo Rama, Choose Love. And the albums that followed had some really good songs. No doubt about it. They're all essential as part of Ringo's catalog. But maybe not consistently strong all the way through.
Yeah. And that I think goes back to my first point about collaborator.
Yeah.
Ringo and Bruce Sugar are working together and they like this batch of songs and they put them out and okay. And then you bring in somebody else that might say, Ringo, let's take these two, put them out as B-sides. And because I think that these songs are better vehicles for you. I wrote them. Look, listen to them, the pitch, the key, the pitch, the key.
Hmm.
So, so
So,
we
guys,
all like Look Up.
closing in on around 2 hours. I think we
Oh,
should
that's all.
let all these people go.
Oh, they're enjoying us yapping, I hope.
No, we
I know
should keep
nobody in my
those.
house wants to hear me yap.
I think our show should be more like 40 minutes, like an album. Because you don't want,
Yeah,
people to
we're the CD of shows.
Yes, exactly.
the double CD.
All right, round the horn.
Social, yeah, we'll start with Ken.
Okay. If you want to listen to my radio show, Every Little Thing, which covers the music of the Beatles group and solo right up to today with interesting musical themes and rarities as well. You can listen to my show on WFDU's website, WFDU.FM, where they store two shows in their archives and keep them there, each show for 2 weeks long. So you can listen on demand to my show, Every Little Thing, on WFDU.FM. Ken Michaels Radio is my website, and one of the many things that's on the website is my ongoing Beatles trivia contest where you can win one of 10 prizes every single week. And I still have the McCartney Legacy Volume 1, and I have one copy of Volume 2 to give away. So if you haven't bought Volume 1, where have you been? I mean, we've been talking about that book since it came out, but you can win that if you haven't gotten around to that, or you can win the new one, Volume 2, as well as a whole bunch of other great prizes, um, including the new, the Badfinger release that just came out called Head First. I only have one copy on CD. This was the album that was made, the last album that Pete Ham was in the group, and it was first released in 2000. Now it's been reissued, remixed by Bob Jackson, who became a new member of Badfinger when this album came out. Joey Malin had left. And so that is available as a prize, as well as lots of different books. Do I have it here? The DVD? Did I leave it out? Ah, here it is. When was the last time you saw Candy?
Wow.
Ringo's very first solo film. And a lot of great people are in this movie, like Marlon Brando, Richard Burton, Walter Matthau, James Coburn. And I have that on Blu-ray. You can win that. A whole mess of good things you could win at kenmichaelsradio.com. Go to the Beatles Trivia and Games page and play along with my Beatles trivia. And since we're coming up to the anniversary of the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, it's a Buddy Holly Beatles trivia question on there. And Talk More Talk, my other Beatles podcast, which deals 99% of the time with the Beatles' solo careers. We will have a new show coming fairly soon. We haven't decided just yet. But as soon as we do have one, I will let you all know about that. And that's about it.
I guess people didn't get the first one or your single copy of the second one yet in your contest because they only like my old books.
That has to be it.
The second book's too long.
Actually, people like these books more than
It should
more
be
than the
40
old
pages.
ones.
The
Yeah.
second book's too long, Alan.
Hmm. I guess we should get a producer who only believes that there should be,
A pamphlet,
five
an
pages
extra.
in a book.
Yeah.
Okay, so Darren.
Yes, I have nothing to give away on my shows. No prizes, no fun. So if you want to like listen to me and not have any fun, I'd love for you to listen. We won't have fun, but you'll have something to listen to. I'm on the air on WFUV Monday through Thursday nights, starting at 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. And as Alan mentioned up top 2 hours ago, if you're in the New York City metropolitan area, we're at 90.7 FM. You can listen online, stream us anywhere, WFUV.org. We also have an app. You can get the app and listen to us on that. So I'm on the air 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Monday through Thursday nights and Saturday afternoons from 1 until 4 p.m. Coming right before Mixed Bag with Don McGee, Mixed Bag, the old Pete Fornatel program, radio program. And so that's on FUV. Look for me on Facebook. Best way to contact me and keep in touch with me personally, my two Facebook pages. And that's Darren Devivo. Send me a friend request or um, um, just click follow or like or whatever it is on the radio page, which is Darren Devivo at what did I name it? Darren Devivo, WFUV DJ and Beatles podcast or something like that. I don't remember.
Don't even know the name
Fine,
of it.
just search, I think.
Alan.
Hey, so you can find me on Facebook as well, either under Allan Kozinn, just plain old Allan Kozinn, or Allan Kozinn Remixed. We brought Giles in to remix the other page. No, he didn't. Um, and of course, there is a McCartney Legacy Facebook page, and various things go up on there, articles, press releases about things like New Venus and Mars, Half Speed Master, stuff like that. Um, you can write to the three of us at things we said today radio show at gmail.com. And you can follow us on Twitter at things we said fab. Although I don't go to Twitter much anymore. Do you guys?
Don't even.
Yeah.
I started an account and never even.
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky a lot, but haven't started a Things We Said Today Blue Sky page yet. I have to do that. But you can find our Facebook page as well, which is Things We Said Today Video Podcast. All the shows get posted there, and links to the Facebook to the YouTube page where all the shows are archived, and yeah, you can also find us on Podbean, and Podbean distributes to pretty much everybody who has audio podcasts, Apple, Google, you name it. And so you can find us everywhere. And yeah, I don't have any radio shows, not giving anything away, but you can read my books. Okay, so is that it for all of us?
I
I
think
think
so.
so.
All right.
I'm
So,
with-
Buy this.
and
Yes.
Buy that.
there it is. Worth
I was
it.
disappointed. I actually bought two CDs, and one of my CDs did not have the hype sticker on the plastic, the little look up sticker. I was very disappointed.
I
Anyway,
got mine with my poster back there, right up on the CD wall. See that? Right under
there
press
you
to
go.
play.
Yes, nice. Yes, so our next show it'll be February when we reconvene.
It's true because there's not much of January left. Anyway, for Ken Michaels and Darren DeVivo, I'm Allan Kozinn. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Look up.